and we'll finish up the show with the mailbag. First question comes from Warren Allsworth, who says, should the PDC have an off week for the Premier League before the UK Open? New format of potentially 3 big games in one night and then straight into a major doesn't seem right.
I mean, I agree that 3 games and then into a major doesn't seem right, but I think the solution is to go back to the old Premier League format or figure out some other format that doesn't have that. Because, well, I mean, I think we're all in agreement that the current Premier League format is just, it ran its course already, and yet they still brought it back this year. I think that's the solution, to change the Premier League format. But it makes sense to have the Premier League night in Exeter the night before the UK Open. It's, a little over an hour by car to Minehead. Obviously, you can't take train to Minehead, and the players aren't going to be taking train. They're going to be driving. So it's not that far off, and anyone in the Premier League isn't going to be playing Friday afternoon. They'll have till Friday night. I don't think playing on Thursday night is that big of a detriment. So while Warren has a lot of great thoughts and a lot of great questions on this one, I'm going to disagree with him on, at least in general. But I think the solution is change the Premier League format, and I will keep saying that until they do.
Yeah, I think they need to change that Premier League format. I'm getting a bit sick and tired of watching Emmerdale on Thursday nights, but I do think it is a good idea from Warren, and we've, as you say, we've got used to that Premier League night in Exeter on the Thursday night, then going into the UK Open in Minehead on the Friday. And the last 3 years, if you include this year, it has been a player outside the Premier League that's won the UK Open, and I think I'm right in saying as well that they've beaten a Premier League player in the final. 2021, it was different during COVID. James Wade, he was a late call up to the Premier League, did win the UK Open that year, but it was behind closed doors. We had the blocks. It wasn't the Thursday after Thursday. Before then, it's not been too uncommon to see Premier League players winning the UK Open. Michael van Gerwen's done it. I recall Peter Wright throwing that monster average, I think it was against Adrian Lewis in the Premier League, and then winning his first major a few days later. But back then, as you say, that the format was different. It was the one game a night. The current format of the Premier League, it is a lot more taxing on the players, especially if you are making that final and playing the 3 games on the night before. So I think a week break, it would be a good idea, but whether it's something that the PDC can implement into the calendar remains to be seen. I know they try and lock in the dates for the Premier League quite soonish, so it might already be a non-starter for 2025. But yeah, I think if they could have that clear week for those Premier League players to then go straight into the UK Open, I don't think you'd have any complaints from those 8 players. It would just make the Premier League even longer than it already is.
Now, Stephen Mann asked, should players who lose in the first round of the UK Open cash? It seems unfair. He says it seems unfair that some have qualified via routes like the Challenge Tour or Riley's qualifier, but don't earn any cash.
Yeah, I think it's probably more unfair on those Riley's qualifiers. Now, I'll come back to that in a minute, but it's only really been since, I think, last year, 2023, that we've seen money come in for the second round of the UK Open. So if you go back before then, if you were starting in round 1, you had to win 2 games to get into the money. So we have seen that prize pot go up in the last couple of years, that the second round losers, they now do bank a grand for getting that far. But for the first round, they are getting nothing. And we do see players qualify via various routes for that first round. The new tour card holders, you've got the players from the Challenge Tour, the Development Tour, and okay, the tour card holders, they are automatically in the field. The Challenge Tour, Development Tour players, it's an added bonus for them. But yeah, I'm mainly looking at the Riley's qualifiers here, because you've spent your £10 to enter the qualifier, you've won it. Yes, you get your Red Riley's polo shirt to wear. I'm not sure whether they get the accommodation included or they get maybe a discounted player's rate for staying at Minehead. Don't quote me on that, but I think £500 for those 32 players in the first round losers, it's an extra 16 grand. I reckon the PDC can find that somewhere. So just to give a little something to those first round losers. And yeah, I think it would be a nice addition, like I say, particularly for those Riley's qualifiers, because yes, it is a big occasion for them. Regardless of if they get any money or not, they are going to be going there. It is, for some of them, maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity, but just to give them that little something for them to go away with if they do lose in the first round, I think would be a nice touch.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think it's eventually going to happen. You mentioned that it was just 2 years ago that even second round losers weren't getting paid, and you go back to before the changes right now to only have 16 Riley's qualifiers, but to give the spots to the development and challenge tour started with 2019. You go back to 2018, you had to make the last 64 in order to get any money. If you got eliminated on Friday afternoon, that was it. There was no payment at all. So it's not been that long that even people that went out on Friday afternoon got something. So I think we're moving in that direction. I agree that it seems like we're almost to that point where it's a bit odd that they're not. I think in the next couple of years that's eventually going to happen. If maybe next year, maybe the year after that, as the prize money keeps growing, and it seems like it's going to keep growing, especially as the sport continues to get more and more audience bases, as well as with Luke Littler, more attention even in places where the sport already has visibility. So I think it will happen. I think it would be a good thing for it to happen. I hope it happens next year, but if not, I think in the next couple of years it will, because it should. You shouldn't be playing in a major tournament and leave in the PDC and leaving it without any prize money.
And our last listener question for this week, it comes from one of Peter Wright's former practice partners, Zach Ward. He says, Dimmy, gamesmanship or just playing his own game?
I think he's just playing his own game. I mean, you look. It was even more pronounced against Damon Hedda, a player that, not officially in the same management stable, but is very close friends with that management stable, and they're, obviously spend a lot of time together and respect each other. He wouldn't have done that to Damon Hedda if it was a tactic. He was doing what he needed to do to find his game and play his best darts. I don't think it was a tactic. It certainly is pronounced at times, and I don't know if it helped. Look at when he did slow down in that match against Luke Humphreys. His performance, I'm not going to say dropped, but he wasn't hitting the shots with the same clutchness and the same regularity. He might still have a big score and visit. He might still have the overall same average, but he was just missing a few more of those checkout combinations. So I'm not positive it actually was helping him in that match. And I wonder if he was overthinking it just a little bit too much, but I don't think it was gamesmanship. I think he wants to make sure his head is in the right place, but sometimes that might lead to just putting your head in the wrong place by trying too hard.
Yeah, I've got to say, first of all, I am a big advocate for playing your own game. Andrew Sinclair of Inside the WDF Lakeside commentary fame, he can vouch for that. But I guess with this one, it does depend on who you ask. And I was chatting to a few people at work on Monday, and it was quite split. You had some people saying it was cheating and they didn't even bother watching the final because it put them off, whereas others were saying they saw nothing wrong with it. And there is no time limit, as far as I'm aware, on how long you can take to throw all three darts. But I think there's got to be an unwritten rule where if you go past a certain time and you do run the risk of being regarded as unsportsmanlike and trying to put your opponent off. And with Dimitri, I said it on Twitter at the weekend, his Q action, some people call it the throw, is right up there as one of the best in the game. It's a lovely action, and if he could sell it to people, he wouldn't have to play himself. He'd make a fortune off that alone. But we have seen there has been a backlash from some fans saying that Dimitri crossed that line and went too far, taking too much time. And he's not the first player. He won't be the last to take that extra bit of time at moments in games. And I don't think this is something, like you say, I don't think it's something that he does to put the opponents off. I really don't think that. I think it's more for his own benefit to make sure that he is ready to play that next throw, that next leg, whatever it might be. And we see others do it, maybe not to that level, but just take that extra few seconds to compose themselves when they're going for a double, or they might go to the table, take a drink of water. And I think it's something that I'm sure people are going to keep an eye on. It is going to be scrutinised a little bit more over the coming weeks, the coming months, to see if it does become more regular. So maybe it is something that he does have to have a look at and be a bit more careful about it in the future. But I think it is something that he might have to work on to avoid maybe having that gamesmanship label thrown at him. But like you, I don't think it's gamesmanship. I think it is purely for his own benefit to make sure that in that moment he's ready to play and play to the best of his ability.